My husband and the stepson I raised as my own were secretly plotting to steal my entire life's work, moving all our assets into a trust I couldn't touch. They thought I was their next victim, but they were wrong. Before I begin, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for choosing to listen to my story. I made the decision to use my own voice to tell it, even though it's grown frail with age. I know I may tremble, and I'm sorry if it's hard to hear. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. It means more than you know. My name is Veronica Sterling, and at 52, I was a curator of beautiful things. Not just the art that hung in the prestigious Atlanta gallery I managed, but the life I had so carefully, so lovingly assembled. My home, a sprawling, elegant Tudor in the heart of Buckhead, was a masterpiece of quiet luxury. Its rooms filled with light, with art, with the warm, happy sounds of a family I believed was my greatest creation. My marriage to Charles Sterling, now in its 15th year, was the sturdy, gilded frame around my perfect life. At 58, Charles was a man of immense charm, a successful financial consultant whose charisma was a force of nature. He moved through Atlanta's elite social circles with an easy, confident grace that I had always admired. Our partnership, I believed, was one of mutual respect and deep affection, a second chance at happiness for both of us. My relationship with my stepson Jordan was perhaps my proudest achievement. When I married Charles, Jordan was a quiet, guarded 13-year-old, still wounded from his parents' bitter divorce years earlier. I had made it my mission to earn his trust, to be a source of steady, unconditional support in his life. Now, at 28, he was a bright, ambitious young man, working alongside his father, and our bond was one of genuine warmth and affection. He called me Ronnie, and I called him my son. Our blended family, I told myself, was a testament to the power of patience, of love, of choosing to build something beautiful from the pieces of a broken past. Our life was a portrait of affluent, blended family success, a picture-perfect composition I had spent 15 years carefully arranging. I had no idea that the men I loved and the boy I had raised as my own were secretly planning to slash the canvas to ribbons. The first hint of a crack in my perfect world was a subtle shift in the atmosphere of our home. It began with whispers. Charles and Jordan, who had always been close, became secretive. Their conversations, once open and easy, now took place in hushed tones. In Charles's study, the door firmly closed. If I entered a room where they were talking, they would abruptly fall silent, exchanging a quick, almost imperceptible look that made my skin prickle with a strange, unnamed unease. Then came the new vocabulary. I started overhearing snippets of their conversations, words that didn't belong in our life, finalizing the paperwork, the trust documents, ensuring a clean transfer. I had assumed it was related to their business, some complex new deal Charles was structuring, but it felt different. It felt personal. Charles, who had always been so open with our shared finances, suddenly became cagey, evasive. When I asked about a large withdrawal from our joint investment account, he waved it away with a dismissive, "Just moving some assets around, darling, for tax purposes. It's all very boring." He, who had once celebrated my sharp analytical mind, was now treating me like a clueless child, patting my head and telling me not to worry my pretty little head about the boring number. The unease in my heart grew, a quiet, persistent hum of wrongness. I started paying closer attention. I noticed the late night hours they spent together in the home office, the way they would quickly minimize their computer screens when I walked in. I noticed the arrival of thick, official-looking envelopes from a law firm I didn't recognize. Envelopes that would quickly disappear into Charles's locked briefcase. I tried to tell myself I was being paranoid. I was a woman who had everything. A loving husband, a beautiful home, a successful career. Why would I invent reasons to be unhappy? I was a curator, a woman who looked for beauty, for meaning, for the story in the art. I did not want to believe that the art of my own life, the beautiful composition I had so carefully created, was hiding an ugly, treacherous secret. But the evidence, the small dissonant notes in the symphony of our perfect life, was becoming impossible to ignore. The final, undeniable proof of their conspiracy came on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. I was working from home, and I needed to use our shared family computer to print a document. And there on the desktop was a folder I'd never seen before. It was labeled in stark, simple letters that made my blood run cold. Sterling Family Trust, final draft. My heart began to pound, a frantic panic rhythm against my ribs. A trust? A family trust? We had never discussed creating a new trust. Our assets were all held jointly. A partnership, a marriage. What was this? With a trembling hand, I tried to open the folder. A small window popped up on the screen. Please enter your password. Password protected. A secret, locked away from me on my own family computer. I stared at the screen, at that small, impenetrable box, and I knew with a certainty that was as cold and as absolute as the grave, that something terrible was happening. My husband and my stepson, the two men I loved and trusted most in the world, were building something together, a new legacy, a new future. And it was a future from which I was being deliberately, systematically, and secretly locked out. The perfect life I thought I was living was a lie, and I was about to find out just how deep the betrayal went. The discovery of the locked folder on our computer was the first tremor in the earthquake that was about to demolish my life. For days, I lived with the knowledge, a cold, hard stone in the pit of my stomach. I said nothing. I watched them, my husband and my stepson, with a new, terrifying clarity. Their loving smiles, their casual terms of endearment, their shared jokes at the dinner table. It all seemed like a grotesque performance now, a play being staged for my benefit, the unsuspecting audience of one. The hushed phone calls continued, their voices low and urgent, full of words like beneficiary, distribution, and fiduciary duty. They would stop talking the moment I entered a room, their faces snapping into masks of bland innocence. Charles, who had once shared every detail of his financial life with me, now deflected my questions with a breezy, condescending wave of his hand. It's just some boring estate planning, Ronnie, he'd say, protecting our assets for the future, for Jordan's future, not our future. The distinction was a small, sharp splinter in my heart. My suspicion, once a vague unease, now became a focused, almost obsessive quest for the truth. I was a curator, a woman trained to research, to authenticate, to look for the hidden provenance of things. Now, I would apply those skills to my own life. I started with the simple things. I checked our joint bank accounts online. The large withdrawal Charles had dismissed as moving assets around had not been moved to another of our accounts. It had been transferred to a new, unfamiliar account, an account I did not have access to, an account titled simply, the Sterling Family Trust. The cold stone in my stomach grew heavier. I then did something I hadn't done in years. I went into Charles's home office while he was out playing golf, a place I usually avoided, respecting his privacy. I didn't know what I was looking for. A letter, a document, anything that would explain the secret he was so carefully guarding. His desk was neat, orderly, but in his trash can beneath a pile of discarded papers I found it. A crumpled piece of paper, a draft of an email to his lawyer. It was a list of assets to be transferred into the new trust. Our house in Buckhead, our shared investment portfolio, the art collection I had spent a lifetime curating, my own personal inheritance from my parents, everything. And at the bottom of the list, a single chilling line. Ensure Veronica Sterling is listed only as a spouse or beneficiary, with no administrative rights or control over the principal. I was to be a beneficiary, yes, but a powerless one. A glorified pensioner in my own life, living on the scraps they chose to dole out, while they controlled everything. And Jordan, my stepson, the boy I had raised as my own, was clearly a part of this scheme. His name, I was sure, would be on that trust as a co-administrator, a co-conspirator. The betrayal was so profound, so complete. It was almost elegant in its cruelty. They weren't just planning to leave me. They were planning to strip me of my entire life's work, my security, my future, all while I was still living with them, still smiling at them, still believing in the family I thought we were. I felt a wave of rage so intense it made me dizzy. I wanted to confront them, to scream, to throw their deceit in their faces. But I knew, with the cold, clear logic of a woman who was now fighting for her life, that an emotional outburst would be a fatal mistake. They would use it against me, twist it into proof of my instability, my irrationality. No, I had to be smarter, I had to be colder, I had to be more strategic. I needed more information, I needed an ally. And there was only one person in the world who might understand the true, hidden nature of the man I had married. The one person who had been there before me. His first wife. Simone Devereaux. Finding Simone Devereaux was not easy. After her bitter, contentious divorce from Charles almost 20 years ago, she had all but vanished. I knew she had moved back to her home state of Texas, to Houston, but that was all I knew. Charles never spoke of her, and any mention of her name was met with a cold, dismissive silence. She was a ghost from a past he had successfully erased. But I was a researcher. I knew how to find people. I spent an entire afternoon online, digging through public records, old social directories, alumni networks, and finally I found her, a Simone Devereaux living in a quiet, respectable neighborhood in Houston, a retired accountant, a woman who, like me, had built a new quiet life for herself. I stared at her phone number for a long, long time, my heart pounding with a mixture of terror and a strange, desperate hope. What would I say to her? How do you call the woman whose life you had, however innocently, taken over and ask for her help? What if she hung up on me? What if she laughed in my face? But the alternative, to sit here in silence, to let them slowly, methodically strip me of everything I had ever worked for, was far more terrifying. With a trembling hand, I dialed the number. It rang once, twice, 3 times. I was about to hang up when a voice, a calm, cool, and slightly wary voice answered. "Hello, is this Simone Devereaux?" I asked, my own voice a weak, reedy thing. I barely recognized. "Who is this?" the voice on the other end asked, a note of suspicion in her tone. I took a deep breath. "My name is Veronica Sterling," I said. I am Charles Sterling's wife." The silence on the other end of the line was absolute, profound. I could almost feel her shock, her disbelief, radiating through the phone. I imagined her in her quiet Houston home, her world suddenly, unexpectedly, invaded by a ghost from her own past. "I see," she said finally, her voice now as cold as ice. "After 15 years of silence, what could you possibly want from me?" I need your help," I stammered, the words tumbling out in a rush of desperation. I think he's doing it again." I told her everything. The hushed phone calls between Charles and my stepson Jordan, the secret meetings, the locked folder on the computer labeled Sterling Family Trust, the way he had become so cagey with our finances, the letter I had found outlining his plan to strip me of all control over our assets. As I spoke, I could feel the atmosphere on the other end of the line begin to shift. Her initial coldness, her wary defensiveness, began to melt away, replaced by a new, chillingly familiar sense of horror. When I finished, she was silent for a long moment. Then she let out a sound that was not a laugh, but a short, bitter, humorless bark of recognition. "He's doing it again," she whispered, her voice a low, furious murmur. "That son of a bitch, he's actually doing it again." "He did this to you?" I asked, my heart aching with a new, strange sense of kinship with this woman I had never met. "The letter," she replied, her voice now hard as stone. "The secret trust, the cagey finances, the slow, methodical isolation. And Jordan, his own son, he used him then too. He made Jordan the co-beneficiary of the trust, turned him against me, made him believe I was the enemy. It was his masterpiece of betrayal, and it left me with nothing." Her words were a confirmation of my deepest fears, a chilling blueprint of the future that awaited me if I did not fight back. "I am so sorry, Simone," I whispered, my own tears starting to fall. "I had no idea." "Of course you didn't," she said, her voice softening slightly with a weary, shared understanding. "That's his genius. He makes you believe you are the only one, that his love is a special, unique thing. He is a predator. And we, my dear," she added, a new dangerous strength entering her voice, "we are his prey, but not anymore." In that moment, a strange, powerful, and utterly unexpected alliance was forged. Two women, separated by 2 decades and 1,000 miles, united by the shared, bitter experience of having been loved and then betrayed by the same charming, ruthless man. "What do we do?" I asked, my voice no longer weak, but filled with a new borrowed strength. "We fight," Simone replied, her voice a low, determined growl. "But we do it intelligently. We do it together. And this time," she added, a note of cold, satisfying fury in her voice, "we are going to burn his entire world to the ground." Our alliance, forged in the crucible of Charles's treachery, was a thing of quiet, methodical power. For the next 2 months, Simone and I spoke on the phone almost daily, our conversations a masterclass in strategic warfare. We were 2 intelligent, wounded women, our initial wariness of each other quickly dissolving into a deep, powerful bond of shared experience and a mutual righteous fury. Simone, a retired accountant, was a meticulous record keeper. She told me with a grim satisfaction, kept every single document from her own ugly divorce from Charles. The fraudulent trust agreements, the falsified financial statements, the threatening letters from his lawyers. It was all there, a complete, damning archive of his predatory playbook. "He's not original, Veronica," she'd said to me one evening, her voice a dry, humorless chuckle. "He's just arrogant. He's using the exact same strategy on you that he used on me. He's so convinced of his own genius that he never imagined his two victims would one day compare notes." She overnighted me a thick package, a complete copy of her own divorce file. As I read through the documents, a chilling sense of déjà vu washed over me. The language of the trust, the way he had moved assets, the legal loopholes he had exploited, it was all identical. I was not just his second wife, I was his sequel. Armed with Simone's evidence, I went to see a lawyer of my own, a formidable woman in Atlanta named Diane Warren, a shark known for her expertise in high-stakes fraudulent divorce cases. I laid out my story, my own suspicions, and then the centerpiece of my case, the complete, documented history of Charles's previous identical crime against his first wife. Diane was, to put it mildly, stunned. "My God," she'd murmured, looking through Simone's old court filings. "This isn't just a divorce case, Mrs. Sterling. This is a pattern of premeditated, serial financial abuse. This is a RICO case waiting to happen." Our strategy became clear. We would not just be fighting for my assets. We would be fighting for Simone's long overdue justice as well. Diane, with my permission, officially brought Simone onto our legal team as a consultant and a future star witness. The three of us, the wronged second wife, the avenging first wife, and the legal gladiator, became a formidable, unstoppable force. While Diane prepared our legal assault, my job was to continue playing the part of the unsuspecting, slightly confused wife. It was the hardest performance of my life. I had to sit at the dinner table with Charles and Jordan, my husband and my stepson, my betrayers, and pretend that everything was normal. I had to endure Charles's condescending explanations of their new family trust, nodding along with a feigned wifely obedience. "It's just to protect us, Ronnie," he'd say, patting my hand, "to make sure you and Jordan are taken care of, no matter what happens." The hypocrisy was so profound, it was almost breathtaking. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away in Houston, Simone was my secret weapon, my intelligence operative. She would feed me information, insights into Charles's character, his weaknesses, his predictable patterns of behavior. "He will get arrogant just before he strikes," she'd warned me. "He will become overly confident, almost giddy. That's when you'll know the final betrayal is coming." And she was right. About a month before they planned to serve me with the divorce papers, Charles's demeanor shifted. He became magnanimous, almost loving. He bought me expensive jewelry, took me to fancy dinners, spoke of a new chapter for us. He was trying to lull me into a false sense of security, to make his final blow seem even more shocking, more devastating. But I knew, thanks to Simone, I knew the playbook. I accepted his gifts with a quiet, sad smile, all while secretly forwarding the receipts to Diane's office. Another piece of evidence in our growing mountain of his financial manipulations. The alliance between me and Simone, two women who should have been rivals, became a source of profound strength for me. We were bound by a shared, bitter history, but we were building a future of shared, triumphant justice. We were no longer his victims. We were his prosecutors. And his trial was about to begin. He thought he was preparing to ambush me, to leave me devastated and alone. He had no idea that I was not alone at all. I had an army of one, a woman who knew his every move, his every lie, his every weakness, and together we were about to bring his entire world crashing down. The day of the ambush, the day they had so carefully planned to be the final devastating act of my erasure, arrived on a Tuesday. Charles had asked me to meet him in his home office for a very important family discussion. His voice on the phone had been full of a grave, somber seriousness, the voice of a man about to deliver what he believed was a final, unassailable judgment. I walked into his office, my heart a steady, calm drum against my ribs. The fear, the anxiety, the heartbreak, they were all still there, but they were now encased in a thick protective layer of cold, strategic fury. Jordan, my stepson, was already there, sitting beside his father, his face a mask of nervous, guilty apprehension. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Charles gestured for me to sit in the large leather armchair opposite his desk, the chair usually reserved for his most important clients. He and Jordan sat together, a united front, a tribunal of two, ready to pronounce my sentence. "Veronica," Charles began, his voice a low, somber murmur. "This is one of the hardest things I have ever had to do." He paused for dramatic effect. "Our marriage, it has run its course. I have filed for divorce." He slid a thick legal-looking document across the polished surface of his desk. The divorce papers. "And," he continued, his voice now taking on a tone of magnanimous, almost regretful authority, "in preparation for this difficult but necessary transition, Jordan and I have taken the liberty of restructuring the family assets to ensure everyone is protected." He slid a second, even thicker document across the desk. "The final draft of the Sterling Family Trust. As you know," he said, his voice a soothing, condescending balm, "we have moved all our marital assets into this trust. It will be managed by myself and by Jordan to ensure its long-term growth and stability. You, of course," he added with a small, pitying smile, "will be taken care of. You are listed as a spousal beneficiary. You will receive a generous monthly stipend for the rest of your life. You will want for nothing." I looked at him, at this man who was so calmly, so arrogantly stripping me of my entire life's work, my home, my assets, my future, and offering me a stipend, like a pensioned-off employee. They expected me to weep. They expected me to plead. They expected me to be a devastated, broken victim. I did not weep. I did not plead. I just smiled. A small, quiet, and I hoped deeply unsettling smile. I reached into my own briefcase, which I had placed on the floor beside me. I took out my own set of documents, a folder just as thick, just as official-looking as theirs. I placed it on the desk beside their papers. "That's very thorough, Charles," I said, my voice calm, almost conversational, "but I believe you've forgotten a few key details in your restructuring." They stared at my folder, a flicker of confused surprise in their eyes. "You see," I continued, opening my folder, "I too have been doing some estate planning, and my research has been extensive." I slid the first document across the desk towards them. It was a copy of Simone Devereaux's own divorce filing from 20 years ago. I had highlighted the relevant sections, the sections detailing the creation of a Devereaux family trust. The sections detailing the transfer of all their marital assets into that trust. The sections detailing how she, his first wife, had been left with nothing but a generous monthly stipend. I watched as the color drained from Charles's face. He stared at the document as if it were a ghost from his past, a ghost I should not have been able to summon. Where did you get this?" he stammered. "From the source," I replied coolly. I then slid the second document across the table. It was a sworn, notarized affidavit from Simone Devereaux herself, detailing Charles's pattern of financial abuse, his lies, his manipulations, and then I delivered my final, devastating blow, my trump card. "I believe you know your ex-wife, Simone," I said, my voice as sharp and as cold as a diamond. "She and I have become quite friendly over the past few months. We've been speaking on the phone every week, comparing notes, sharing stories. It has been incredibly illuminating." I leaned forward, my gaze locking with his, enjoying the look of pure, unadulterated terror that was now blooming in his eyes. "And she and I concluded, have jointly hired a top-tier asset recovery law firm. They have been instructed to file a massive lawsuit against you and your son, citing a multi-decade pattern of conspiracy to commit marital fraud. It seems your little trust is about to be the subject of a very, very hostile takeover by your wives, both of them." The ambush was complete. Their carefully laid plot had not just failed, it had been turned back on them with a force they could not possibly have anticipated. They were not just facing a divorce, they were facing a criminal conspiracy charge, a massive lawsuit from two women they had wronged, and the complete and utter ruin of their reputations and their finances. They were stunned, they were terrified, and they were finally, after all these years, completely, utterly checkmated. The silence in that office following my revelation was a beautiful, terrible thing. It was the sound of two arrogant, deceitful men realizing their entire world had just collapsed. Charles stared at me, his face a mask of ashen, horrified disbelief. Jordan, my stepson, the boy I had raised, just looked at his father, then at me, his own face crumbling with a shame so profound it was almost pitiable. He was not a master manipulator like his father. He was just a weak, greedy boy who had followed a monster down a very dark path. Charles was the first to find his voice, a weak, sputtering thing. You can't do this, Veronica," he stammered. This is insane. You spoke to Simone? She's a bitter, lying woman? Is she?" I replied, my voice calm, almost gentle. "Or is she just the first chapter in a book you seem to write over and over again, Charles? A book about a charming man who uses women, who steals their assets, and who then discards them when they are no longer useful to him. I am simply the sequel, and I, unlike Simone, had the benefit of reading the first edition before you could write my ending." My lawyer, Diane Warren, had filed our lawsuit that very morning. It was a masterpiece of legal retribution, a multi-million-dollar suit citing not just marital fraud, but a pattern of racketeering, a civil RICO charge, based on his repeated use of the same fraudulent scheme to enrich himself at the expense of his spouses. It was a legal firestorm that would consume him, faced with a massive lawsuit from two women, with a mountain of documented proof of a pattern of fraud that spanned decades. Charles's carefully constructed world imploded, with a satisfying, almost immediate finality. His business partners, his clients, his important friends, they all began to distance themselves from the unfolding scandal. His reputation as a brilliant, trustworthy financial consultant was destroyed overnight. He was forced into a settlement. There was no trial. His lawyers knew he wouldn't stand a chance. The settlement was a complete and utter victory for us. It not only gave me everything I was entitled to from our 15-year marriage, the house, my share of our investments, my own assets restored to my sole control, but it also forced him to finally, after 20 long years, pay Simone the money he had stolen from her, with interest. It was a double reckoning, a justice that was 2 decades overdue. Jordan, named as the co-conspirator in the lawsuit, was socially and morally bankrupt. His father's disgrace was his own. He was left with nothing. His anticipated inheritance, completely consumed by legal fees and settlement payments. The story ends, as it should, with a final, quiet scene of triumph. A few months after the settlement was finalized, I flew to Houston. I met Simone Devereaux in person for the first time. We sat on the patio of a beautiful restaurant. 2 women who had been unwillingly bound by the same man's treachery, now united in a strange, powerful, and deeply satisfying friendship. She was elegant, intelligent, and had a laugh that was full of a hard-won wisdom. We didn't spend our time talking about Charles, about the pain he had caused us. We spoke of our own lives, our careers, our hopes for the future. We were not his victims. We were survivors. We were the architects of our own new lives. As the sun set, casting a warm, golden glow over the city, we raised our glasses of wine in a toast. To unexpected alliances, Simone said, her eyes shining with a fierce, intelligent light. And to foolish men, I replied, a small, genuine smile on my lips, who underestimate the women they have wronged. We drank, a silent acknowledgement of our shared victory. We had proven that the wives he had thought he could so easily discard were in fact the ones who held all the power. And together we had ensured that Charles Sterling would be left with nothing but his own regrets, and the undeniable historical record of his spectacular, self-inflicted downfall.